Okay, so what we have here is a shower pan that started to get redone. I'm not really sure of the history. I think there may have been a shower pan leak of some sort. So the customer had hired another contractor. This tile is basically a ceramic. Looks like a 4 by 8 ceramic tile that's staggered, obviously, and you know, it looks okay. It's, you know, sanded grout I'm never really happy with, you know, inside of a shower, because between these tile there's little spacers that are built in to each tile, so when you match them up they have non-sanded grout. So the only grout you can get in there is non-sanded grout, and then it's not very deep with ceramic tile. So, you know, there's just a lot of areas here with non-sanded grout that I would not be pleased to do inside of a shower, for a couple of reasons. One, you can see clearly where they put Durock up on the wall, but they did not do any, it looks like they used mastic on here too, but they did not do any waterproofing whatsoever. So Durock, doesn't matter what you use, Durock, Hardy Backer, Wonder Board, whatever your backer board is, green board, doesn't matter what your backer board is. If water ever penetrates these grout lines, and there's a whole lot of them in here, then it's still going to seep through. It's going to seep through all this porous backer board. It's going to cause mold and mildew at the very least into the board, and it's going to come out the grout lines, usually at the perimeter here. And at very most, if it gets wet enough, it'll seep through this backer board, go on to the other side, and eventually drip and drip and drip until your, you know, floor is saturated. Then when your floor gets saturated to its extreme limit, then it'll go through your ceiling, which is right below downstairs here. So in your dining room you'll start to have a leak, and you'll go, oh, I got a leaky shower pan. No, you don't have a leaky shower pan. It's extremely rare that I run into leaky shower pans, but I run into this all the time where people don't do the due diligence in regard to waterproofing stuff. So they didn't waterproof the curb, although the curb was never finished, and they definitely didn't waterproof this backer board. So again, I'm not here, you know, I go through some of my videos to critique so that I can kind of show what not to do if you're having something done. And so it's not so much a critique of the other person's work as it is an education for some people that are not knowledgeable on how showers should be built or waterproofed, or, you know, have a shower that's going to last a long time. So although this shower would last a long time, it would eventually, if not in a year or 2 or 5 years or 6 or 7 years down the road, it's going to have water penetration into the grout lines, if not through the wall, definitely through the floor. And then you run into, you know, the problem. When I say the floor, I don't mean the shower pan floor. I mean outside onto the floor, and then the ceiling below, as I said before. So anyway, getting back to what I was getting at here. This is a very large shower. This is almost 8 foot across from left to right side, with 2 shower heads, one on the left and one on the right. So I don't know what was here before. I assume there's probably excuse me, a bathtub of some sort, or maybe this got built this way on purpose. But anyway, regardless, they did have an issue, so they hired a contractor to come in and retile. The customer could not find the same color tile, matching tile, for this gray pattern, so they chose white that is actually the same size. And so the other contractor apparently, you know, did as I do. They, you know, cut out a couple feet up and around and take out all that wallboard and tile and all that stuff, and then start from scratch, including with the shower pan. Put new wallboard up, waterproof it, which they didn't do, and then start tiling. So they got to a certain point when the customer became uncomfortable with the way things were going and decided to stop work, which is a good idea, for a few reasons. First of all, we have this ceramic penny tile. I call it penny tile. And sometimes they use this stuff on shower floor, bathroom floors. This didn't even stick. This piece here I just happened to grab. Didn't even stick to the thin set that was on here. This kind of stuck. Some of it did. Most of it did, but obviously not all of it. Penny tile is a funny little thing that is very difficult to work with. Anytime I have somebody that wants to do penny tile, say on a bathroom floor or something, it's not too bad if that bathroom floor is completely flat, straight, with no dips or anything like that. Then it's not awful bad. I don't like it for a lot of reasons. One, because you have to do a lot of cutting. I mean, imagine, I mean, these are literally the size of about a quarter. I don't know why they call them penny tile. And so everywhere the tile goes up against a wall somewhere, all these fill-in pieces have to be cut individually, and it's a lot of work. It's very tedious to make all these little half cuts and stick them in there and stick them in there and stick them. I mean, you can literally take hours of your day just doing all the fill-in, let alone the field tile, but all the little fill-in pieces, and then these little triangular pieces that go up against the wall. I mean, you know, imagine, especially in a shower this size, you know, doing all those little fill-in pieces is really a pain. Secondary, well, actually the first part of it is actually first, which would be it's very busy. In other words, there's literally hundreds of grout lines going on here. You can imagine if you did not do your due diligence and seal all of this grout, you would have an enormous area for water to penetrate into your shower pan. You know, showers, Achilles heel of a shower is always a shower pan. Walls don't fall off the 2x4s and stuff like that. Sometimes you get wetness and dampness below where the shower valve is at, and you know, it's kind of incidental on the walls, but the shower pan is always your Achilles heel. That's what usually fails first, if anything, because of saturation of water and the chemicals, etc., etc. So when you give yourself a lot of opportunity for water to get into your pan, it's never a good thing. If they had done a 2x2 on a mat, or a 3x3 or 4x4, then that would be a good choice. A 4x4 meaning one of these tile, you know, ceramic tile on the floor. Not that I'm hip on ceramic, I'm not. But if they did something like that, you would decrease your grout lines by hundreds, you know, literally, because there's a lot of grout going on here. The other reason is because they're very thin tile. All these penny tile are not even quite, it's not even a quarter of an inch. It's just very thin. And so when you're dealing with a thin tile, the only way to properly set that is what they tried to do over here using mastic. So this would be a good application, say for, you know, backsplash or something where you have a completely flat wall and you can put mastic on it. If you don't put mastic, if you end up using thin set, then what inevitably happens is you're trying to push these tile down into the thin set, and look what happens. All this tile has thin set that's pushed up where the grout line is supposed to be. Not so much over here. They did okay over here, but then again, I don't know how well this tile is set. They wanted to make sure the tile was set well, so a lot of areas they pushed down the tile, and of course a thin set came up. So then the other tedious part is you got to come behind and start cleaning out your grout lines so that you can actually get grout in there later when you're trying to push these tile down. And then of course the third thing, these tile are great for going around a corner or something like that, but in the same light, if you have a hump or a bump or a dip or anything like that, these tile will definitely follow that. So I'm quite surprised there's no bumps or dips or anything like that going on, but if there were, you would definitely see with this type of tile that it would just kind of wrap around it. So there's a lot of reasons I don't like this tile. Again, if you're doing it on a flat floor, on a surface that you know is flat and is pristine and all that stuff, it's not too bad. It's still kind of a catchy type of thing doing thin set. You would have to use a very thin notch trowel, a 3/16, or even smaller if you could, so that you don't end up with this problem when you start pushing down this tile. And then of course when they cut around the drain, they cut, and the drain didn't even, it's kind of funny because look what they did. They filled in, when they poured the pan, I don't know the construction method that they used, but when they poured the pan, this is all your pan mortar mix. And the pan mortar mix is still sitting up on the ridge of this drain. And the holes where the drain is supposed to screw into, right here, the holes are completely filled with mortar mix. So I don't know how they planned on screwing this drain down without cleaning out those holes. And I don't even know if that's possible if the mortar mix got in there wet. Anyway, look at that slop. Anyway, another issue is they cut these tile literally flush with the drain top. And I'm never about trying to cut my tile flush with the drain top. It looks really nice. They spend a lot of time, each individual tile, making a circular cut. The problem is if for whatever reason the floor pushes down over time, settles, you know, 4, 5, 6 years down the road, then the tile could theoretically be below, because it's so flush with the drain that the tile could be below where the drain is at, and then you're going to have water pooling up around here constantly. So what I like to do is set my tile slightly above, maybe about, I don't know, about 3/8 or so, or 1/4 inch above the drain, and then I do a little taper cut, you know, with each one of my tile that goes around the drain, so that if the whole floor pushes down for any reason over the years, it doesn't really matter, because there's enough wiggle room in there that the worst case scenario is maybe a little of the grout that goes around the drain right up against the tile will crack or whatever, then you just regrout it, but you don't have the problem with the pooling of the water around the drain. Anyway, getting back to here, I talk a lot. Getting back to here, they did the tile on the wall first, which again, you know, is kind of a mistake. They actually set the tile first and then they set the floor tile after that. So everywhere you see, you have a larger grout line than what is necessary. If they had just simply done all this tile, it would have cut down on how many of these cuts they had. But if they did all this tile first and set the wall tile on top of it, then the water would naturally want to flow off and onto the tile, and then you wouldn't have this problem of this little gully, because that's kind of what this is. And even though you're going to fill it with grout, that's always an Achilles heel of shower pans also. Anyway, I did some of the demo already because I'm always curious about how other tile people do tile. Look at this thin set that they spread out and they let dry overnight. I don't know what happened here, if they got to this point and were told to leave, or if this is what they planned on being a flat surface to put the tile onto, but it's not very good. Oh, here's a dip right here. I don't know if you can see it through the camera, but this tile is stuck to the floor and it sits lower, and then this tile is lower, but here's your dip. So inevitably, I can show you better there. See there? So that's another reason I'm not fond of this tile. It's very, very difficult to work with on a large area to get exactly right. And when you're trying to make this tile slope down to the drain, which they did a pretty good job of up until this point here, it's very problematic. On a smaller application, say a 3x3 shower, which would be about half of this size, it's not too bad, but I don't recommend things that I would never do for myself. And although people fall in love with the looks and pragmatic issues are always different. So it may look great, you may see it in a showroom and go, oh, that looks so wonderful, that I want it in my shower. I'm just telling you, I wouldn't put it in my shower, so I wouldn't recommend it for somebody else. And I actually talked the customer out of not doing this again. We're going to go with a 2x2 tile once I get all this tore out. Anyway, getting back to the build process, this is what I was curious about. So normally I'll do my curb 3 high, 3 2x4s high, and I'll end up with, what is that, about 4.5 inches. So they did a 4x4 on this curb. They just stuck one pressure treated 4x4, which I'm not against pressure treated wood. I used to use it on my curbs as well. I was told that it swells and contracts and bends, which, you know, I know it does bend, so I kind of stopped using it. But even if I were to use 2x4 pressure treated wood again, and I'm doing 3 layers up, you know, all 3 of them are meshed together once I nail all 3 of them in, and I do a lot of nails on it. With this one, this is a long run. This is almost 8 foot long. So my feeling is once this started bending, it would cause a lot more damage than perhaps 3 2x4s put together. So I'm not hip on doing a 4x4. A pressure treated 4x4 as your curb. That's interesting. I've never seen that. They didn't wrap the whole shower curb. You know, they came. This is kind of funny. So they came up to this point, and then I guess they ran out of pan liner. I don't know how far up the wall they went, but the assumption is they didn't go very far because they ran out here. So I guess they kind of halved the difference. You know, they said, well, I'm just guessing on this. Well, we got to go up to at least here at this first tile, so let's do that, and then whoops, we don't have enough room to wrap it, so we'll just stop here. But then on this other side, they wrapped this pan liner, Jesus, 18 inches up. you know, 18 inches up the wall, which is not a bad thing. It's just kind of bizarre that they did so much on here, but yet they scrimped where it matters the most. So that's interesting. They used Durarock. This is sheetrock up under here, which is probably the best way to set this tile. That way you could use mastic instead of you know, that's basically what they did on this tile. When this wall was new, they used green board undoubtedly, and they used mastic, which is a lot easier to work with, and they set all their tile and it's all nice and pristine and, you know, no problems with it. These guys decided to use Durarock, which is always difficult because now you're running into thin set. You can't really use mastic on Durarock, so now they use thin set on top of that, which is neither here nor there. I'm just kind of giving you a heads up on it. This is interesting also. This bench, I don't know what they did here. You know, apparently this bench was a lot thinner at one point, and they wrapped this with Durarock, which is a good idea. I wouldn't put sheetrock on here or any other material. Durarock would be a standard thing to do. But then they built up this thin set, and it's very difficult to knock off. I've been knocking it off for a little bit, but they built up this thin set, like a huge layer of thin set, maybe 3/4 of an inch. And then they put another layer of Durarock. So you have this first layer of Durarock, a bunch of thin set, a second layer of Durarock, and then a bunch more thin set on top of the surface before they put the tile on. So, you know, like, what were they doing? What were they thinking? I don't know. You know, overall the tiling process looks good. Looks like they did, you know, proper slope. Yeah, it's not too bad. So they did a proper slope on the bench. You know, they were very symmetrical. They used a little, you know, tile on the back here to make up the difference. These two match, those two match, and then the middle one, and, you know, all the symmetry is correct. But then what were they thinking when they built this bench? So, but the biggest deal about this is, as I was getting back to when I first started the video, this non-sanded grout is extremely porous because it's so thin. It's not only thin between the tiles, but it's thin here. Even when you're trying to push it down with your float, you're lucky if you get that non-sanded grout halfway between your tile, and this tile is very thin to begin with. So you have a lot of grout lines here on this bench. And what happens is water will seep through that. Even with the slope, water is going to seep through those grout lines, and they did nothing to waterproof this bench. They used a lot of material. This bench probably weighs 80 pounds, but they did nothing at all to waterproof it. So if I started splashing water on there right now, you can imagine what would happen. That, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it's a little entertaining to me to watch how other people build things. I kind of wish I was here during the process and give them a heads up. I'm not the most perfect tiler in the world, but some of these things, you know, defy logic. And sometimes I'm at a loss for words. So anyway, the whole point to this video is I'm going to do a before and after. I'm not going to show the process of pouring the pan and, you know, redoing the drain and all that stuff, because I have other videos on my channel with regard to all that stuff. But I'm doing a before and after. So anytime you have a shower pan that you think leaks, or you're going to redo the shower pan for any reason, this is basically what you're looking at. This is a process. This is why if you're getting a quote of, you know, $1,000 or more for labor, this is why. This is a lot of work to take out all this stuff and not disrupt all the tile and all the stuff going on above it. Is a lot of work. You know, this will take me 5 days to finish this thing, from all this tear out of all this material to putting everything back in again, and it's a waste of time and material for the customer, because if it was done right to begin with, I wouldn't be here. But it is what it is, so I'm going to get back started on this. Okay, this is interesting. It's only been maybe 15 or 20 minutes earlier, and I have most of this top part pulled out. Shower pan will be next, and I will get to investigate how they did this exactly. So they had a lot of pan liner, as I already anticipated. They were trying to get at least 6 inches. They were probably about 7 up the wall there. So in order to get that, they had to scrimp over here. If they had tried to wrap that extra 3.5 inches, it would have been 3.5 inches lower over here. So that was a pretty good guess on that part. They wrapped that up pretty tall, but they didn't know what to do here in the corner. And so what they ended up doing was a lot of this excess was just pushed between these 2x4s here, and it was kind of a shoddy way to do it. I wouldn't have done it that way. I understand they're dealing with a very thin tile, and you don't want to bump out because you want these tile to match up as good as possible. So although I don't like to do it, this had been the place to go, so that you can push the corner in here instead of folding it. I usually fold it, but I'm usually doing a larger tile, so even with the bump out it doesn't really matter. I'm starting from the bottom, working my way up the wall, and so the bump out is insurmountable. You don't really notice it once all the tile is up. On this tile, because we're trying to follow something that's kind of straight and smooth and all that stuff, I kind of get where they were going with this, trying to figure out what to do with it, but hello, you have this gap right here. So pushing it in there would have been the right way to do it. Again, I'm not hip on that. I don't feel like it should be done that way. I know a lot of tilers do it that way. But that's what I would have done here, and that's what I'm probably going to do when I put mine in. Speaking of other tilers, would you guys quit putting your wallboard inside of your pan? Because all this wallboard that I took out was put up first. And then the shower pan was poured. So you got probably about 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches of shower pan material right here. And the wallboard was put first, so there's a huge trough in here. So again, imagine your shower pan getting wet, and you know, whatever area that it's getting wet at, it's eventually going to kind of, you know, find its way out to the perimeter, because water is going to absorb the driest spot it can. And once it hits this wallboard, which you stuck inside of this first, right, put it up against the joist here, and then the water is going to start saturating this wallboard. I've seen it time and time and again when I tear out showers, where I see mold and mildew that's growing up the wallboard because you stuck it inside of the pan. Pour your pan first, please guys, please. Pour your pan first and then put your wallboard on top of the pan, or rise it above the pan, or whatever, however you want to do it, but quit putting your wallboard inside the pan. Even experienced tilers that I also see on YouTube, I cringe because I see them put the wallboard up first, then they pour the pan. And I don't understand why they don't understand. Water is going to go up and ruin your wallboard. It's just so simple. Anyway, so they had a lot of shower pan material in here. And the reason now I see why it rose up so far up on this wall, because they had so much of it. They encompassed the shower pan. Actually, looks like they scabbed in, glued in some pieces here, so they doubled up on the shower pan material in order to wrap their bench. So this is an interesting thing for a couple of reasons. First of all, they did their bench correct, which means that they built their bench first and then they did their pan. I've seen sometimes where the pan is set first and the pan material is against the wall, and then they put the bench, you know, encompass it as part of the pan, and that's a big no-no. So they did this right. They did their bench first and then they did their pan afterwards. So that was good. But all this material, all this discombobulated, glued in, scabbed in shower pan liner that's all bunched up over here because they had so much they didn't know what to do with, is totally unnecessary for a couple of reasons. One, Curdy Schluter, which I'm not advocating you guys buy from them. I don't like, it's not that I don't like their products, they're just very expensive and it's overkill. But Curdy makes a bench. It's basically a foam bench that's about this same size. So if they wanted a bench, if the customer wanted a bench in here, I would have suggested spending 80 bucks, 85, whatever they cost, and putting in the foam bench. Those benches are specifically designed to be within the shower because they're all foam. They can't absorb water and no water is going to get inside of them. And I've done a couple of them before. I like them. So this is about the size of a Curdy bench. All this makeup of material that they did and wrapping the thing with the pan liner and blah 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 could have just been avoided by putting in the Curdy bench in here. Or it could have been avoided if they had just done the pan liner, the 6-8 inches up the wall all the way around the bench, put the wallboard on top of it, and again, Durarock or Wonderboard or Hardyboard would wrap around this, right? And then you waterproof it. So the simple process of putting 2 or 3 coats of RedGuard on top of your wallboard is doing the same thing as all this junk that they put on here and tried to make it work. Which kind of tells me now why there is so much buildup. I don't know where it's at. Oh, here's the face of the bench. Look at that. I mean, it's a huge buildup. So I don't know why they did the buildup that way, but I'm assuming because they had so much of this material, they were trying to get a flat surface again. They couldn't get a flat surface without doing a huge buildup. But anyway, the point is, you can still do your pan liner, you know, still have the bench outside. I'm going to keep it outside of the pan. So when I put my pan in, I'm going to wrap it around, same as, you know, they did, except that I'm going to cut the same area, not cut, but I'm going to rise it above wherever it ends up on this wall is going to go around on the front of the bench, all the way around. Excuse me. And then I'm going to wrap this with Durarock. And once I wrap it with Durarock, I'm going to mud all the seams of the Durarock, and I'm going to red guard it 2 or 3 times. And even if water gets through the tile or the grout lines or whatever the case is, it's going to hit that the red guard same as it would have this pan liner, and it's going to stop it. And red guard wouldn't have given you all the buildup because it's a topical membrane. It would have been easy. But anyway, so all this material is almost gone except for the shower pan itself, and I'm going to pull that out. And if there's any surprises, I will be back. Okay, the shower pan came off relatively easily when I first started out. I started on this area over here, and I was hitting a lot of sand, so that kind of bothered me. I'm like, why do I have a shower pan that's never been used before with sand in it? Because normally this is what happens. A shower pan gets saturated with water, continues to get saturated with water over and over and over, 5 years, 6, 8 years, 10 years down the road. The tile that's on top of your pan starts popping off. And I get that call quite a bit. Why is my tile popping off? And when the tile popped off, why am I scooping up sand in my hand? Because this is sand mix, which is how it started out, and then all the chemicals and all that stuff that saturates your pan turns it back to sand again. So my curiosity was kind of up, because why is this sand mix not solid the way it should be? Where a lot of it's solid, most of this pan came up in pieces rather than chunks. I did get a few chunks out of here, but for the most part it came up in pieces. So I'm going to go out on a limb and talk about something a little totally different. There is an idea about putting a pre-slope in a pan. I have a video called Pre-Slope Explained. I'm not going to get into that, but I disagree with them. Anyway, when you do a pre-slope, you do a dry pack, what they call a dry pack. So when you mix your sand mix, it's supposed to be very, very waterless. For lack of a better term, it doesn't have a lot of water in it, so that when you squeeze it together, it takes a lot to kind of form something in your hand. So that's called dry packing. My feeling is that they dry packed this shower pan, because it makes sense that if you don't add enough water to mortar mix, you're not going to get all the adhesion that, you know, Portland cement basically has the stuff in it to make it hard. And if you're dry packing and you don't have enough water mixed in with it, my contention is it's not going to be as hard as it needs to be, and therefore it comes up fairly easily. So when I'm pounding this around, it's just breaking with, you know, no effort whatsoever. Look at that piece, just fell off. So, you know, I'm kind of curious about this. Don't know why this happened. Conversely, it could have been that they poured it too rich, that they actually put too much water in it, and therefore it broke down those adhesive qualities as well. So I don't know which one it is, but just thought I'd put that out there. As I said, this came up relatively easily, and you know, nothing else to report. There's no other real issues. I'm going to change out the drain. So when I get all this liner out, I'm going to change out the drain and kind of start from scratch. One last little thing on this tear out. This is, I took out the drain cap. Where's it at? So that's the old drain cap, and basically it was bottomed out. I mean, as far down as you could thread it, it was down to the bottom. So that gave you, it literally gives you about this much of thin set at the bottom, which is probably not the smartest idea in the world. They could have backed it out, you know, at least to where it was about 3/4 of an inch or so. But anyway, so I backed that out, and then lo and behold, there are 2 bolts holding this top flange down, or the bottom flange as it were. 2 bolts. There are supposed to be 4.
So bolt 3 and 4 are not even there, which is kind of interesting. I've never seen that before. Well, if 2 bolts can hold it down, or 4 bolts can hold it down, I guess 2 can hold it down just as well. Maybe that's their logic. Also, you can't tell on the video, but this top flange is slanted. So I don't know how that came about. Maybe the floor is slanted and they didn't make up for it. I don't know. But it is slanted, and therefore the drain cap was always slanted as well, because it has to follow this when you turn it down. But this 2 bolt thing, I've never seen this. 4 bolts come with every flange. So kind of, it's interesting development. They did this right though. They didn't cut a circle into their pan. They did it the way I did it. They actually cut an X, and then you can see the flaps, the excess flaps push down with this top flap, or the top flange on top of it. That's the way I do them. So, yay for doing this right. Well, they sort of did it right. No, they did it right. Yay. So, yeah, they cut an X here and then just pushed it down, pushed the flange down into it. But 2 bolts holding it down. Interesting. So, that's the end of that. And now the prep is done. New curb, scabbing between the studs, and a new drain. Shower pan liner goes next, and then I'm pouring the pan. Okay, since I was last back on camera, I have poured the pan, as you can clearly see. I have put the wallboard up, and I have red guarded the entire thing. 2 coats, and 3 coats in the corners. Every corner gets 3 coats at least. And of course the curb. Curb got put in instead of the 4x4 that was there before. It was 3 2x4s. Wrapped it with Durarock. Wrapped the bench with Durarock, and of course red guarded it. So the curb also gets 3 coats of red guard all the way down. You notice, and I've mentioned on other videos that I have, you notice the red guard, I do the perimeter, I don't know, about a foot or so out from that wall, and about 8-9 inches out from all the other walls. And I get the question often, why don't I just red guard the entire floor all the way up to the drain? That way it would be impermeable to water. But I'm not comfortable doing that. As I mentioned on other videos, I kind of feel like if ever water gets in there, that I want it to be somehow channeled down to the drain, and including breathing. So at the drain level, I'm probably 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches up from the edge of the drain worth of the mortar, and that's a very thin, relative to the walls and stuff like that, it's relatively thin mortar. So I'd rather have water be able to have an egress to come out and evaporate through the grout lines if possible. I guess one day I will be comfortable painting the whole thing. I just don't want to make, as they say, a mold sandwich, meaning that you have nowhere for the water to go except underneath the red guard and between the tile and the red guard. And so that's why I do that. Anyway, so this tile isn't set yet. All I've been doing is kind of figuring out my layout. So the layout will be, I usually do full tile where you can see it the most and any cuts come to the back. But in this case I have a really straight line on my curb. So I'm going to do this tile first, and just wrapped around here I'll have probably 3/4 cut down on the end there, which normally would be on this side of the curb. But by the time I put my tile on the walls and everything come down, of course I grout that first, that 3/4 cut will come to almost nothing. So that's what I'm doing. And so once I have all this set, I will grout the entire floor before I set the wall tile. Then the wall tile will come down to the floor, that will be grouted, and it will be done. So I've spent, this is my 3rd day, of course not full days, but I think the first day was probably the only full day. That was about 7 or 8 hours take out all the material, put the new material back in, and then of course the prep has been the last day and a half, and so the tiling process begins. Okay, and this is the finished product. I have the 2x2 on the floor, put a brand new drain in. When I do my tile around the drain, I never go up to the lip of the drain. I always go a little bit above it, so there's probably about a 1/4 inch rise on the tile, and then I do little tapered cuts around it so that I have a positive water flow, and there'll never be an issue with water puddling around the drain. Anyway, this job is about a 5-day job. Anytime I do a shower pan, that's about how long it takes. A lot of drying time involved in it, obviously. This grout is a little darker when it's wet, which it is now, and it will dry out to that darker gray color once it's dry. And the curb got rebuilt. I believe there was a different type of tile on here with bullnose before, a smaller tile with bullnose, and so I asked the customer if he could get some of this floor tile, which he was able to do, and of course I wrapped it with floor tile so that it's kind of contiguous, that it runs from the floor over, but also so we can get away from having a lot of lines on there. There's 3 grout lines on this entire curb, and so that's basically it. You know, the bench got rebuilt and everything is finished and basically back to new when this was originally done. So same color tile and all that stuff as opposed to the white tile that was there before. Good choice for the floor. Still a lot of grout lines. This is a very large shower. This is a 3 foot and some inches by about 7 foot long shower. So there's a lot of grout lines, and of course they need to seal this grout as good as possible to prevent any leakage of water getting into the pan. But this job is finished, so I'm out of here and on to the next one.